our sacred self-healing training call, examining, inquiring, and discovering the aspects of trust in our life. My name is Jona Bryndis. You guys all know me, and this workshop is part of our sacred self-healing program. In other words, I want you guys to participate. There are parts in here that we will work out together. And I want to invite you and encourage you to speak into the microphone or use the chat function here that allows us to communicate with another and to work these things out together. In this workshop, we are going to investigate the pillars of trust and the mechanics of trust and distrust. And this is where we all going to work together. We're going to really put this together here because it's very different depending on the level of which we look at things, and of course, you know, depending on what we want in life. So we're going to see how all this is linked together, how to develop trust, how to rebuild trust after we lost trust. There's many different ways how this can happen, and we're going to learn about the importance of this whole subject, all right, and why trusting is such an important part of our human life, of our social life, and how we can better discern. And then we're going to close with a roadmap on how to learn to better trust in ourselves, because we'll find out that a lot of our issues with trust, that they link back obviously to our experiences and to some of the ways we see the world. They also link back to our beliefs and mindsets and worldviews. And so a lot of our discussion here today will have to do with this. So let's get started without further ado into the topic, trusting. Okay, so before we move into the sort of, there's a little lecture part here just to get you guys sort of warmed up for the subject. I just want to know from those of you who are here, real quick, what is it for you? I mean, you see a definition of trust here on your screen. It's the firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, character, or strength in someone or of someone or something. And this, of course, is a mental way, or the intellectual way of defining it. But I would just like to take a snapshot here real quick from how you personally see what trust is. What is the role of trust in your life? What is trust for you? Who wants to just share real quick? I mean, you can also use the chat function, but it's nice to start a workshop with hearing all your voices. Typically, when you go to an in-person workshop, everybody would say their name and introduce themselves, and we can't do this. We don't have the time to do this here, but I would love to hear some of you. What is the meaning of trust in your life, and how do you handle it as of right now? What's the snapshot?
I like your definition of trust there, Jona. I can honestly tell you I've never deeply thought about this, but just with your opening, I can recognize that my entire life I had no idea what trust was, and I would be honest in telling you it's more so of what's been happening late. Up until this point, I just never, I would use the word trust, but in retrospect, it would be more flippant than to actually know or feel what it really is. And in essence, until I could trust myself, the rest was moot. And I didn't know how to do that for a long time either. So I don't think it would be possible for me to trust anyone or anything if I didn't trust myself.
Mm-hmm. Very, very beautiful conclusion. Thank you for sharing that. So, any more views or sort of just snapshots of awareness about trust from any one of you?
Hi, it's Becky.
Hi, Becky.
Hi. What comes up for me is the word safety. Like
Safety.
for me, I think how I view trust is like, do I feel safe like within myself, or do I feel safe with others?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, I think, is what determines if I feel I can trust somebody or not,
Mm-hmm.
or myself even.
So what I hear you say is that the way you decide if something is trustworthy is by, whether it makes you feel safe or not.
Yes.
On whatever
How,
level, right? I mean, there's many
yeah,
levels. Yeah.
yeah. I think up until now, yeah, that's how I viewed it.
Thank you, Becky.
Mhm.
Any more perspectives on trust here? Different perspectives. For me personally, very similar to what Cheryl shared. I didn't actually think a lot about trust growing up, being a young woman, because the environment that I grew up in was not very safe, and there was literally nothing I could trust in. There was neither um, a reliability, nor any kind of consistency, nor truth, and any form of like I could just rely on something. There was none of that. So in my personal case, trust was forced upon me, so to speak, in the sense that I had to learn to trust in myself at a very, very early stage. Too early, according to like developmental psychology. So I never actually learned what that is like to trust somebody else until much later in my life. Who of you has had similar experiences, or the opposite perhaps, where you unconditionally trusted in everything, and were sort of in the course of your life, things were perhaps
Can you
disappointed
hear
or
me?
yes, yeah, hear you now.
It's Janet.
Hi, Janet.
Hello. Thank you. The one thing that comes to mind in terms of my experience or comes up is I seem to have been imbued, like on the normal side, like what we would be experienced as humans, imbued with loyalty and trust somehow. Like almost to my death, have I been loyal and trustful of people and situations.
Okay. And that's
It's just like,
as far as you remember back, like from childhood on,
yeah, it's
basically?
not even like a mental thing. And I have definitely had a very emotionally eruptive family and unexpected situations, but somehow within all that, there was still this loyalty and trust that was unspoken.
Okay, so you
That's what
bringing
comes
in
up for me now.
you bringing in two other aspects. You're bringing in loyalty. Okay,
Yeah,
so this is a little different from safety, right? If you do really
yeah,
feel into
yeah.
it, right? And also you bringing in something that has to do with unspoken. Okay, so this is well, it's a belief, right? When it's unspoken, it means that it's a kind of like a belief, like we all believe that the sun is going to rise tomorrow, right? I mean, nobody really talks about trusting in the
Yeah, I
sun.
guess it would be like true nature, like the nature of things. Like have never considered it. I haven't had a issue with trust until these last couple of years, quite frankly.
Okay.
So coming today, I'm like, oh, you know, things have already accumulated before having this, but it's rarely been an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay, so
and
so
yeah.
what I hear you say, Janet, is
Hmm.
that in the stage of your life where you're at, it hasn't really popped up as a conscious sort of issue for you until just recently, where you've had, I suppose, experiences that made you distrust, or that showed you that the trust that you had, that you mentioned in the beginning here, this unquestioned loyalty or trust in something or someone, that this got disappointed, I suppose, right? Like you've had the extreme
Yeah,
opposite
like
experience.
on a big level. Like for instance, today I'm trying to clear off my hard drive. Kind of like my hard drive was just filled up unexpectedly in my own self about trust, whatever dimension of it had to do with it. And it's just like I'm filled up with my, whatever. It has never been mental. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
people can relate to it. It's always
Mm-hmm.
just been a trust there
Yes.
in humanity. And I kind of realized that I would give people 10,000 chances sort of person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my hard drive, along with my computer, just got fed up. And I've only recently, like, go step by step through my relationships and go, okay, well,
Okay, you're blipping out here. Okay, you blipped out, Janet. Sorry if if it feels like I'm interrupting you right now, but this is a very good point and a great addition here to our initial sharing, to our initial snapshots of what trust means to us. Basically, what I hear you say is that you never actually questioned trust or your ability to trust, and almost to the point that it was no longer healthy for you, which you have come to find out, and that it was never actually something that you processed in you called it mental, but let's just call it consciously. You never consciously thought about trust. You just yeah, like Cheryl is adding to this sort of in a form of naivete, so the unspoken loyalty, naively trusting something into something until you get proven otherwise. Can I ask the audience here, who of you sees yourself in that category, that you've never actually really thought about trust, that you just blindly trusted or had this well, this faith? I think you mentioned this, Janet. You said something, faith in humans, and then got disappointed. Who of you is more on that category, that you never really consciously thought about trust until, or especially if it happens repeatedly, like Cheryl just mentioned here, like for example, trusting unworthy people over and over again, or like you said, Janet, giving people 10,000 chances over and over again. So who of you would put themselves into that category more? Like never really thought about trust, until it became a problem, so to speak. Yeah, that's like a good 30%, 40% of us. Yeah. Okay, who of you would put him or herself more into the category that I did, growing up in an environment that was completely untrustworthy, very obviously not safe, and more or less not trusting at all. All right, so really being sort of more like I can't trust in anything or anybody other than myself. Okay, that's like 20% of you. Okay. So for the rest of you who have not raised your hand, let's get a perspective on that. So those of you who didn't raise their hand, either in either of these extremes, where would you put yourself? What is your relationship with trust? Who wants to share? Just to get a different perspective. Who of you feels really competent in that way, like knowing what to trust, what not to trust, knowing sort of how to navigate through life and experiencing this sort of as an effortless sailing through all the curveballs and the humps and the waves. Is there anybody here who really feels, and this isn't critical. I mean this, we all are at different stages of our journey, and we develop certain skills, and being able to trust is part of this skill set, okay, as humans. Okay. Yeah, so some of you see themselves as working on it. I'm working on it. George, your mic is open. Did you want to share?
Yeah, hi, Jona.
Hi.
I think for me, there's two things. I think from a young, I always had, for me, trust was a feeling, kind of on a one-to-one thing where I very quickly trusted or didn't trust, and a very much kind of a feeling thing on individual people.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but also that I gave a lot of trust to people until that's disproven in a lot of ways.
So did in your inner statistics, right? Like sort of your life experience, right? The statistics. Did this inner feeling that you described, is that trustworthy for you today? Like as a grown-up,
Uh, in
middle-aged man, can.
in the main, it is trustworthy,
Hmm.
but I still but I still have trust issues.
Right. Okay. So your overall view is that you have a good trust compass in you.
Yeah,
So there's an overall a willingness and capacity to trust. But then in some areas, maybe would you exclude just particular areas, for example? You say, but in this particular area, I have a hard time with trusting. Other than that, I can trust my inner feeling, but here or there, I recognize I can't. Is that what you mean, George?
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So which are these areas for you? Just to and you guys, everybody else can think about that too. If there's certain areas in your life where you particularly have a hard time trusting. I mean, it could be money, it could be um, relationships, love, intimacy, in that direction, but it can also be like trust in humans. Okay, so Denise is sharing for her is particularly in regards to decision making. Cool. Thank you for sharing. Syria is sharing. Okay, so Syria is sharing. She trusted. Well, I'm adding. I'm rephrasing a little bit here. Unconditionally, and never. And from then on, you never trusted again until that was disappointed. But you've grown to understand, to the understanding that it is all about how much I trust myself, how much I trust, no matter what happens, I can manage. I'm not afraid. So you see that there's a connection to fear, Syria. That's what I read of your reflection here. That is similar to what Becky said. So if something, if there's a good level of safety, then you're not that afraid of trusting. You've grown to understanding others more, growing and growing together with them. Very beautiful. Yeah, we will learn that this is a big part of trusting. So you work on finding the full picture um, of what is guiding other people. And this is a really a good way of looking at it. Okay, I think it's part of all our lives to experience trust and distrust and the consequences of that, and then to recontextualize this internally and form, a more expanded worldview out of that, and to grow through that, really. Janet is sharing. Speaking the truth in situations and finding a touchstone in myself, like, yeah, this is basically the trust in self here in context with the big world.
Hi, Jona, Carmel here.
Yeah, hey, Kamal.
With trust, I can trust myself in most conditions that I will make the right choice. But my downfall is being trusting with people more than anything.
So decision making.
Yep.
Decision making
Usually
in like, say, 3D stuff, like organizing things, like, well, getting things done. You're good. You can trust
Yep.
in your sort of compass. But when it's
Yes.
people, I mean, are you talking about people in general? Like that would include the people that you work with, the people that you interact with on all levels, or are you specifically referring to intimacy or love relationships?
Intimacy and love and relationships, yes.
Okay.
Most people I work with, I get a good idea which ones have an integrity level, and I can trust that they will get, the job done. But when it comes to relationships, that's where I'm very trusting, and I sometimes get run over, so to speak.
So let me paraphrase this here a little bit.
Yep.
What I hear you say is that when things are sort of, when there's a certain clarity, a certain logic, a certain rationale about things. So working with people, there is a clarity about this, right? I mean, there's an outspoken goal. There's typically a whole set of rules at this workplace, or, you know, like how to interact
Yep.
with another, and you have no problems there.
No.
But when it comes to actual feelings and emotions, then it's not that easy for you to trust. So you trust in your ability to see the picture, to have clarity about the rationale, about the structure, the organization. Those things you can trust in. But when it's
Yeah.
emotional things, not so much. Okay,
No.
this is very important to become aware of, because when we talk about trust is a matter of feeling, well, then there is a bit of a paradox there, right? If it
Okay.
is a matter of feeling, and yet at the same time we realize that it's easy for us to trust if there's clear rules, if there's clear, you know, a clear construct, if it's logic, if it's, you know, then it's not. When it's clear, when it's all clear, then it's easy for me. But when it's about feelings, not so much. And the paradox is obviously, well, but if trust is a feeling, and I can't trust when it's about feelings, then the core of the problem might be in the way I process my feelings. Or, as some of you have already hinted at, the degree or the capacity to trust in my own feelings, right? So all I wanted to point out here, as the one guiding you through this process, is that there is a bit of a paradox with trust that we all feel in ourselves, and especially those of us who have the goal and the willingness to grow, because we recognize as we mature, well, you know, the whole trust thing isn't that easy. It isn't black or white. It isn't, you know, sort of like, you know, logic, like logic. It isn't binary. It's fluid, and it has a lot to do with how we feel towards ourselves, and of course towards the person, all right, that we are interacting with. So I want you to just sort of do a little sticky note here, and remind yourself that trust isn't a black and white, isn't that sort of a binary thing. Okay, so there's aspects to this, as we will learn, that can make it harder or easier for us to trust. And in the end, it's a matter of awareness, which these things are. So all of you having issues with trust in particular areas, okay, if you just become aware of this for yourself right now, what these areas are, just take a little note, okay, and write that down for yourself, what this area is. And then let's investigate this together, and how we can work on building and developing trust here. Yeah, so some of you share. Thank you, Carmel, for sharing. This is very important for us to see that a lot of us have that competency in certain areas, and where we have no problems with trusting ourselves. And I find this as an energy coach in my practice every day, that there is particularly one area where that is not so clear. And there's many different kinds of trust, and we'll talk about this here in a minute. But I like what you shared, Syria. You're not afraid of getting hurt. You're not afraid of your trust being, you know, sort of proven wrong or whatever, but you recognize it now. So you've gone through both extremes, and now you find yourself in a place where it's more like a continual growth process for you. Yes, many comments here from you guys. Reading this is hard for me sometimes when there's so many people in a webinar. It's easier if you just talk. Annette is adding a component here. She mostly only trusted in animals. Yeah, growing up. When you, a lot of people have this. that at some point they lose trust in humans, but they trust in nature and trust in animals, and that's actually a good place to be in, to build something better than not trusting in anything anymore. Yeah, Syria, that is an interesting component with trust that you are bringing up here in your sharing in the chat, and that is choice. You realize that you can't decide if you want to get hurt, well, or if you want to trust. And this is also something that we need to become more aware of. How this choice and how we actually do this. Okay, how do we choose whether to trust or to not trust? So here, or to distrust. So here, just a little bit of structure. We want to systematically investigate this together. There's different types of trust. Trust in society, that is obviously something that has to do with our collective, the places that they can be different in different societies, but there are certain things that we trust in, like for instance, justice would be one of them. But also a certain safety within, our societies, certain rules and so forth, that agreements that are formed in our societies, with slight variations, obviously, depending on the cultural and ethnic background. One of the things that I've learned very, very early in my life, because I moved a lot from one country to another, learned different cultures, different languages, and I realized that, well, what is trusted and reliable in one society might not be, you might not be able to trust in that in another society. Uh, some of you who might have that experience, if you come from, like, say, Europe, typical sort of European person, and also American, so the white Western world, so to speak, and you travel to Southeast Asia, there is a very interesting experience that you can make there. I don't know if any of you have had that experience, but there is in some of the languages in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Thailand, and so forth, there is no word for no. And so when you ask somebody a question, a yes or no question, their vocabulary it does not allow them to say no. It's also something cultural. Okay, this would be sort of offending in that culture. And so you ask somebody a yes or no question, which as a coming from the Western world, you see that as a polite thing, right? Do you like this? Right, is a typical question. And in Southeast Asia, this creates a really tricky situation for the person. They will always say yes. They will always say yes, and this can lead to a lot of miscommunication and misunderstandings between two different cultures. How, especially when it's about things where you have to trust, like, can you do this for me, or will you be able to be here at 3 p.m. or something, right? These are things that require us to trust with any kind of transaction or interaction. We have a lot of many different sets of agreements where the simple yes or no determines whether we can trust or not, and you can't really do that. So this is just something here to expand our minds about this. This is one of these frameworks that we sometimes have to investigate, because a lot of times not a feeling that we can trust in something or someone might be just due to the framework that is there. Okay, so when we talk about trust in nature, like Annette just mentioned, she trusts an animal she used to as a child more than in humans, say. Well, that's a very beautiful thing, and I think we all have a gravity towards that. But then, what about your trust in, like being with a tiger, okay, or with a bird of prey, or with a snake? I mean, yeah, it's nature, okay, and the snake, or any kind of predator animal, its designated purpose is predatory. Okay, so can you trust in a tiger? Right, and here is where most people get into a little bit of a confliction inside, because they idealize nature and don't realize that a lot of nature is actually quite, harsh. Okay, so when we humanize nature, then we'll also find that a lot of these societal frameworks that we built, that allow us to trust in another, like justice or fairness or integrity, that, nature doesn't actually work with that. So do you guys get what where I'm hinting at? Okay, so we have to question some things. Sometimes it can't be a blind trust. Obviously, there's the trust in others or in relationships. That's something here more in a general nature, like just other people, okay, not specifically in love relationships, but that would be a specific kind. I mean, the trust and love, when what happens when we have a more intimate relationship with someone, and then of course not just the intimacy and the willingness to trust another, but also the willingness to trust in love itself. Okay, there's also on a more advanced level aspects like the trust and trust. Okay, that's also something that can be corrupted. Trust in government, yes, something that we obviously experience right now firsthand, that this is not always a given. And trust in leadership, a lot of people experience that in their jobs or their companies, or sometimes also their families. Okay, and then there's also, of course, the trust in self, as you have already pointed at.
Hi, Jona.
Yes.
May I
Hey,
share?
Denise.
Yeah,
Yes, please, of
yeah,
course. Keep
yeah,
sharing, guys.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, for me, I noticed that for me, throughout the years, the hardest thing for me has been trusting, particularly in my decision making. I guess being afraid of the future or making a mistake or missing out on something. But what I have been discovering the last little while, like months, it's been like I am safe no matter what. Like, I mean, I make like if I make a decision and I make a mistake, the solution comes right away after admitting admitting this to myself, right? So yeah, it's almost like I'm here and no matter what, I cannot mess it up. But I do need to be, I mean, I am present and I am consciously facing and learning my own signaling, right? Like learning my
That's
own
a very big
signaling.
one.
Yeah.
And that's really the purpose of this workshop, okay? To become able to discern better and to actually learn the mechanics of that, how we can trust in the signaling, or even just to become aware of the mechanics in us, okay? Which is a little different with each of us, okay? So that there we have obviously components that have to do with our experiences, that have to do with our personal lives, right? Or the different layers of how we experience ourselves, as Janet is pointing out here in the chat. Obviously, this has to do with how we physically, how we emotionally and mentally navigate, even spiritually, how we navigate through the world. So these navigation aspects, or this inner compass, or trust compass, if you will, right, Denise? So that's the one that you were referring to. You were
Yes.
realizing now that this is improving. It's improving. So there is a clear component of time with that. Okay, so or maturity, life experience. Yes, of course, nobody likes making mistakes, right? Nobody likes missing out. Nobody, I mean, nobody wants that. Okay, but then again, as we get older, we're like, okay, what's the big deal, of missing out on that cookie? Okay, because tomorrow there's going to be more cookies or different cookie, so we all have that sort of awareness that is growing in us as we are growing as people. And obviously, when we are in this sort of self-help, self-improvement realm, where we want to consciously work on this, and this is really what all the sacred self-healing community and the teachings and everything, that what this is about, how we can learn the parts that we weren't previously aware of. How can we make the unconscious conscious, and then become better at mastering ourselves, become better at, in your case, decision making. Or, I mean, obviously decision making is so broad, really. It has a lot to do with trust in general, because it's a choice, as we've already found out, but also decision making in a more practical way, in physical ways, and emotional ways, in mental, social, financial, or spiritual ways. So yes, it's there's a continuum to it, and I think we can already agree that with time, or with learning, and with growing, and with living, we are becoming better at it. Except for in some cases, and we want to investigate this here, what can lead to us not learning from it, or getting stuck there. Okay. So let's again here return to those systematics of it. So ways of trusting, you guys have already beautifully demonstrated this. There are many different ways to trust. One is the unconditional trust. In the discussion for this month's energy forecast, I have already raised this, because I've pointed this out as one of the main energies and main themes for this month, trust. And I've asked a question. I want to ask this question again. It was very surprising to me what the answer was there. Unconditional trust. When is it appropriate, or for whom is it appropriate to unconditionally trust? And the answer I'm looking for is a very simple one. What stage in our life are we forced to unconditionally trust?
Are you there, Jona?
When we learn to walk, Jona? I mean, I don't know. Just,
Say that again, please.
when we learn to walk, I
Yeah.
mean, you have to unconditionally trust yourself.
Yeah. So what age is that? When is that in your life? When you're a child, right?
Two.
Toddler. Yeah, toddler age. Infant obviously is not a conscious choice, but when you're a toddler, it's not entirely conscious, but you kind of learn that you can trust. But up until you can basically form your own world view, which is between 5 and 6, you have to trust unconditionally, right? That, yeah, I mean, infant, toddler, sort of preschool age. Okay, this is from a developmental standpoint, the time around 6 years old, when you start going to school, when you form your own industry, you form your own understanding of yourself and what you can do and what you can choose. And before that, you really don't have a choice. You really don't. So unconditional trust is something that is appropriate when we are in our early developmental stages. Unconditional trust can be a problem when we are a grown-up. Something that Janet mentioned earlier, namely, if we stay there, if we stay in that place of unconditional trust, then it can actually lead to something that I would call blind trust. A blind trust. Okay, and blind trust is something we have to investigate, because that's something that many of us struggle with and are not aware that this is what we're struggling with. So unconditional trust at a certain maturity level is appropriate, but at a different maturity level is not appropriate. So here we get the time component. There is something about that. So we come into this world being forced to trust, and it's the first way we experience ourselves and the world. And then we have to learn, well, we can't really trust everybody and everything, okay? And we have to begin to develop like a lexicon and a compass inside of us that allows us to navigate that. We can, however, and I don't want to sound like a party pooper here, we can, however, develop certain levels of unconditional trust in certain areas of our lives. And to a degree, it is this, sort of unlocking of this divine inner child in us with all the things that come with unconditional trust, namely creativity and abundance and so forth, and a certain lightness, a certain inner peace. So I don't know about you guys, but I have had many situations in my life where I wished I could just be naive and just not know all the things that I know and not haven't experienced all the things that I experienced, where I just wanted to be in that place of naivete, as Cheryl, as you called it earlier. Who of you has had that, like this conscious thought, like, ah, I wish I was just, really, in this unconscious place where I don't know anywhere, I wouldn't know any of all these things. Yeah, so this is there's a desire in us, guys, to wanting to unconditional trust. But a lot of that has to do with some of the psychology and also our neurology, or the way our whole entire system is designed, our biology, okay? So that's one way of trusting, unconditional trust. Or blind trust if it's in a later stage in our life. Conditional trust, that's sort of the more evolved version of that. Okay, that's a trust where we learn that, okay, in some situations I can trust, and with some people I can trust, but with others I can't. Okay, so this is where somebody already has developed a little bit of a roadmap. And there's no judgment to this. We're probably refining our roadmap throughout our lives. We never stop doing that because we never stop growing, really. But a conditional trust is something that you can tell now by the way I've structured this, is something to aim for. Okay. Then we have here as an a sort of more extreme way of trusting, namely the misplaced trust is also like the blind trust. It's like trusting in the wrong thing or the wrong person. Okay, and I'm sure we all have experienced this. There's nothing wrong with this, because this is what contributed to us becoming able to develop a more conditional trust. But if a person keeps doing this over and over again and experiences things such as trauma, abuse, or perhaps sort of destruction, or overall sort of negativity towards life, then this needs to be investigated. Then a person needs to work on this. Yes, and this, yeah, okay, Cheryl is sharing that there's an aspect of accountability with it. That she realizes that she has to take ownership of all the times that she has been untrustworthy as well. That's obviously part of that whole sort of conscious making process when it comes to trust. And then with that then also comes the empathy and the evaluation of why the other person became untrustworthy. Okay, so if is there a connection? If I become, or if I am not trustworthy, how trustworthy how much can the other person trust in me, and and vice versa. So we're realizing that there is an interaction aspect of trust. And of course, then a way of trusting is to just simply distrust. Okay, this would be, or almost the opposite of blind trust, is to just simply not trust in anything. All right, nothing anymore. So then we need to look at, okay, these are the different ways. Now let's look at the purpose of trust. And here's where the interaction part comes in that we just found out about. The purpose of trust is to learn how to collaborate. I mentioned that our system is designed to trust. How do I know this? Our neurotransmitter, our neurology is designed to learn from another, okay, which means we can only learn from another if we can trust another to a certain degree. Okay, so somebody says, hey, look at me how I do this. Maybe you can learn something from it, and that it's a form of trusting. Okay, you trusting in the person's competency or whatever, even if you not sure if you can trust in it, but you look at what the other person does, it works for the other person. Now, you know, you get, you have this learning through other people's experiences, which is also part of our neurological design, namely through neuroplasticity and mirroring. So we learn through mirroring. We don't have to learn everything in our life through doing it ourselves. We can learn from other people. This is what our whole entire academia and so forth is built upon. We have not experienced all the stuff that we learn in school ourselves. We learned this through others that have written it down. Or, you know, we learn about history through other people who write down their view, but it's not, you know, who says that it was exactly that way, how they wrote it down. So there is a lot of you know, trust aspects regarding the source of things and whether there is this competency, whether we trust in that. Then, of course, there's also the aspect of growth. So, yeah, I mean, we can also decide to never trust anybody and just learn through our own experiences. But we already know that as an individual, our capacity to grow is then limited. Okay, so here is the purpose of trust, is to understand that in interacting with another, ideally learning from another and collaborating with another, that there is a higher potential there. So our higher potential as individual is linked to the potential or to the capacity to trust in others. And then there's obviously the sharing aspect where, you know, if we don't just collaborate, if we don't just grow together and learn from another, but if we also start sharing resources, sharing knowledge, sharing, you know, emotions, sharing, you know, communicating and so forth, all this is sharing based, then we can even grow farther. And again, here there is in our biochemistry, it's clearly anchored in our biochemistry. There are neurotransmitters that reward us when we do this, when we collaborate, when we learn from another, when we grow together, when we share, when we trust in another. There is this sincere desire in all of us wanting to trust, and that is not because we're idiots. It's because we have a biochemistry that actually rewards us. It makes us feel good. We have serotonin, we have oxytocin, we have dopamine, neurotransmitters that reward us in certain situations with other people. Okay, we have mirror neurons, okay, that learn from others. We even have the ability to learn from others that we don't, that we aren't in direct contact with, so we can learn through sort of collective energies indeed. And we have neurotransmitters in us that reward us every time we are trustworthy. Okay, this is very important to understand. This is part of our biological condition that we want to trust. So summarizing here, we can come to the conclusion that trust is a key component of our social lives. And this is a bit mental, but this is sort of what you will find in scholarly articles and so forth. It is the result of reciprocal interaction that proves to benefit both or all, like whomever I interact with. So trust is a key component here for our whole entire collective, not only to live together, but also to evolve together. And why is that? Because if trust proves, you know, to make us all grow, to help us, to benefit all of us, then it's rewarded. So please bear this in mind. It is therefore totally necessary, in my view, to investigate this and to really become aware of our ability to trust or not, and what the mechanics are, and what this inner compass looks like. So here are a few stats, really, I mean, it's not stats, but, you know, something basically culminated results of all kinds of research, the value of trust. Okay, the value of trust, and you can apply this to a small social group, like be a family or a couple, or, you know, a village or a town or a company or a country. It doesn't matter. Obviously, a lot of that research has been done in corporate settings, in companies. And the number one value of trust is productivity. So if a society, if a family, if a company, if they have a high level of trust, then the productivity will go up, the output will increase. Okay, this is very, very important to understand. Predictability, reliability, that's a value. Okay, it goes up. Okay, so if I can trust, then it's a lot easier for me to navigate, because things become a little more predictable for me, and I know whom I can rely on to, and I know what I can expect. I don't have to guess. I don't have to waste so much energy in trying to figure this all out, or perhaps even trying to do this all myself, because I don't trust anybody. Okay, so there's also a time aspect to that. Namely, if I can trust, all right, if I can leave the door open, if I don't feel like I have to, I feel safe enough, it's reliable enough where I live, that I don't have to have all these extra locks on my door and extra security system and all these complexities that we add to our lives in order to feel safer, then it's a lot easier for me. It doesn't take that much time, and it doesn't take that much energy. So, and not being able to predict or having certainty about certain things, or being able to rely on things, increases our need to manage our resources, our energy more. So it takes time and effort. Another big value of trust, or outcome sort of trust, is motivation. It motivates me to trust more, motivates me to share more, motivates me to collaborate more, motivates me to excel, motivates me to become more creative, motivates me to, it increases so many aspects of life, because I don't have to waste all this energy on figuring things out or protecting myself. Then another value of trust is better decision making. Because if I know whom I can trust and whom I can't trust, that's part of this compass, this trust compass in me, right? Then my decision making is more optimized. I don't waste so much time on waiting for other people to do something if I know that I can't trust them anyway. Okay, this can be anything, in regards to love, in regards to feelings, in regards to time, in regards to work. It just improves our decision making. Another value of trust is also freedom. I just don't have to, my life is not that complex, because I don't have to like constantly think about all these things. And like I've already mentioned, the security systems and the protection and the self-defense and all that, I don't need to. It makes me feel freer. It also makes me feel more creative. Choose is a value of trust. It's a lot easier to be honest and to be truthful when you're in an environment where there is a general level of trust. Integrity is a result of trust. And again, the more trusting or trustworthy the environment is, the more integrity we will find there, meaning that everybody operates in the same way and trusts another, and that then produces a social framework, okay, that allows all of us to excel and to strive, for this greater good for all. And ultimately, it increases affluence because of the lack of, all this the defense structure in a confliction that comes up in us when we can't trust. It produces, not only a higher level of productivity, but also a much bigger sort of vision of life and future. I can think bigger, I can imagine things to be better in the future. I can have faith in humanity. I can have faith in us that we can do this. So let's bear this in mind when we talk about trust, that there are clear benefits in regards to trust, not just for myself personally, but also for the greater collective. But trust needs to be built. It needs to be developed. It needs to be tested. As we've learned.
Jona, can we trust or experience trust if we don't love or experience love?
Well, this is a deeper question, Cheryl, that cannot be answered sort of with a yes or no, because what you will find out is that all these higher vibratory resonances in our lives, such as love, such as trust, such as compassion, such as empathy, such as forgiveness, that they all interlock, obviously, and they build upon another. Okay, so you can say, like, if you wanted to stay neutral, you can say that there definitely is a link between the two. Okay, so there is no love without trust, but there's also no love without truth. So you can say there's no love without truth. Okay, so it's in a linear sense, you can't really answer that question, but in a non-linear sense, you can say yes, they require another. They are operating in this higher vibratory realm with another. They're influencing another. Okay, someone who has never experienced love or unconditional love can still experience trust. Okay, and then slowly build the ability to love out of that. And someone who cannot trust can still experience unconditional love and then learn to trust out of that experience of unconditional love. You see what I'm saying? So it's not an easy, it's not a binary answer. That's why when we talk about, you know, like some of these things that you guys shared in the beginning, trust being a feeling thing, which is absolutely correct. But there are also mechanics to it, and if we cannot trust our feelings, we'll notice. If we cannot trust our inner signals, if we don't know ourselves, well, then it's questionable if what we call trust or what we enact as trust, it really is trustworthy. But Cheryl, did this answer your question, or is this sufficient?
Yeah, I was going really mental with your answer, so I'm going to listen to this again.
So yes, but no. Yes, but no is the typical non-linear answer. Okay, so yes, you need trust to love, but you can also learn to trust through love. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's just summarize what distrust does. So that would be sort of on the other extreme. Okay, so it reduces productivity, it reduces creativity, and it increases inner stress, it increases inner confliction. It decreases collaboration, it decreases motivation, it influences our decision making. Yes, Denise. It reduces freedom. It increases externalization, and meaning that said, that's a very important part, especially right now, where we are at here in this world today. Okay, externalization means that, you know, like the infant or the toddler that is forced to trust, that is, you know, in that dependency role, it needs to externalize its power. It doesn't have power. Okay, but if we do this as a grown-up and we can't trust, then it will lead to us externalizing that. So it's a very, very important part of, you know, like a linkage here between trust and internal and external power. It destroys integrity. It does. Yeah, if you have like say an agreement, and this is one of these common examples that sociologists or psychologists use to talk about trust. You know, you have like say a village, and there's 10 people that live in that village, and they all agree to them paying into a trust fund. That's by the way the word where the word comes from, the financial word. You know, everybody puts in a certain amount of money, and you know, then you buy like a common shared resource or whatever. It's very common in the older days, like with farming and everything. You know, you would have a silo, and that would allow all of you to produce more, to store more of your agricultural goods, and then you know, you share, you know, what comes out of that sort of collaborative benefit, okay, the growth that has occurred throughout it. And it takes only one person to stop paying into that, okay, for the whole entire village to no longer trust into the whole project, okay? So the problem, the bad apple problem, is a really big problem here for us today, because you know, when we look into our societies and politics and all that, we see so many examples of people or organizations that we can't trust, that it has this effect on our overall integrity levels, that we no longer believe in trust. Okay, this is very, very important. It corrupts our trust in self as well. So the more distrusting we become towards others and the whole, if you will, the less we can trust in ourselves. Another thing, and this is particularly important here to understand in regards to spirituality and self-growth, it increases our wishful thinking. Blind trust is ultimately a form of wishful thinking, guys, if it's done as a grown-up, because as a grown-up, we are no longer in that dependent situation. We are independent. That's what we need to become, all right? And if we are not, and yet we still blindly trust, then you know, it creates sort of a mismatch of realities. Okay, then our perception begins to get skewed, because now we are acting like a dependent, but we no longer are, and that mismatch then leads to colliding of realities, and it can lead to mental illness too, because if we constantly experience our life sort of as this colliding worlds, and I want to be willing to trust, but I don't qualify the trust, or I don't actually ever test the trust, then it leads to, you know, sort of a form of fantasizing, if you will, or escape. Then, and this is something that we all experience, what distrust does, it increases fears. It increases anxiousness in us, because, you know, with decreased trust, obviously there's less predictability, there's more uncertainty, and that also produces physiological states in which it becomes harder and harder for us to trust, because now our neurotransmitters and our biology, they are sensitized. Okay, and it also increases isolation. Okay, it makes us no longer wanting, you know, as it decreases our motivation, no longer wanting to trust, and it cuts us off from not just the opportunity, but it really also cuts us off from the actual experience. And so there's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that as well. You know, the more we distrust, the more untrustworthy people become, the less other people trust us. And now, you know, we're finding us in a place of total isolation. This is really important to understand here, you know, these consequences of distrust, guys. And we have to move on, but I just want to point out that this is often something we're not aware of. We are, however, aware of, you know, what this lack of trust does in us. Okay, and this is here something I don't remember. I think, Syria, you pointed out that you wanted to learn how other people see things, and sort of what is going on in others, right? Because that's also a bigger part of navigating, is understanding, you know, why other people don't trust, or why they're not trustworthy. And I guess that's clear for all of us, that, you know, when our trust gets gets proven wrong, or when we have negative experiences, that it forms types of disappointment and frustration in us. It can lead all the way to a form of negativity, a lack of motivation. The wishful thinking can also lead to a lot of distraction mechanisms. So, you know, like one of the ways right now how we cope with the lack of trust is by just constantly distracting ourselves with stuff that, you know, just sort of makes us not having to make that choice. Okay, and this goes from starts at social media and ends, you know, with just constant busyness and other people's dramas. or ourselves creating lots of drama. Self-bias, you know, retreating into a place of egotism or narcissism, you know, where we say, I don't care about the world, you know, I only do what's best for me. And, you know, where we sort of go into this relativism and atheism and all these isms, you know, that are ultimately just there to justify why I don't want to cooperate or collaborate or trust anymore. Fantasizing, I've mentioned, it's a different form of wishful thinking and blind trust, blind faith. Okay, so blind faith can lead to fantasizing. Okay, it can lead to us wanting to see signs and everything. You know, I bet that is a sign that I need to move to Portugal, or I bet this is means that I'm not supposed to be with this person, or that I'm not supposed to trust in this person. Can you guys relate to that? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I've gotten here into this monologuing kind of place, but do you understand the severity of this? Not really wanting to trust anymore, you know, being so disappointed and feeling victimized, forming a worldview that is based on victimhood. You know, sort of like no matter what I do, you know, you're screwed either way, and it's all bad out there. So generalizations. Okay. Yeah, thank you for your texts here. Yeah, Cheryl is sharing. She can see the temptations in the patterns. Yes, these are all patterns in one way or another that we adopt. Okay, as a consequence of lack of trust, guys. This can be very bad for us. Okay, so we need to understand within ourselves how all this is linked. Our capacity to trust is determined by our willingness to share, forgive, learn, and grow. This is what it comes down to. So there's no way to prevent ourselves from learning through disappointment, through missing out, through you know, making mistakes, through messing up, through trusting in the wrong person. There's no way to prevent that. So our capacity to trust, and with it, actually, our capacity to grow, you know, is determined by our willingness to do this. And that's what we really need to understand here. This is what it comes down to. So what are these pillars of trust? Number one pillar of trust is clarity. This is something that you've heard in Carmel's sharing at the beginning. You know, when things are logic, when there's a rationale, when there is, you know, clear needs, clear agreements, clear values, clear boundaries, clear accountability, clear, you know, agreements. Okay, when there's clarity about things, then it becomes easier for us to trust. Competency. When you know what the rules of engagement are, when you know what your strengths and weaknesses are, or the strengths and weaknesses of the person or the company or whatever, when it's linked to clarity, but it's also linked to accountability, as Cheryl just mentioned, you know, of like knowing who is trustworthy in a certain situation. Okay, I would trust Jeff with my children 100%. Okay, whatever the decision is that needs to be made. And if I pick a babysitter, then I will probably trust that babysitter in a, you know, to a certain level, like maybe anywhere from hopefully 60 to like 80 or 90%. But would I trust my neighbor 100%? Probably not. Would I trust a stranger with my kids? Absolutely not. So you see, this has to do with competency. It's me. It's both. It's me evaluating the competence that the other person has, but it's also me judging the other person. You know, like really seeing that, and my own competency, obviously. Commitment. That's a big one. You know, like say the babysitter. You know, might might be young, might only be 18. So obviously there is a limit to her competency or his, but there is a commitment, and I really trust that my babysitter really loves my children, and you know, I know that she has the intention of being trustworthy. Okay, so if I can feel that commitment, and I'm committing myself to her, and I know maybe there will be situations where, you know, she makes decisions that I don't approve of or whatever, but I'm okay with it. Okay, I give it a certain a realm, a space to grow. Okay, because I commit myself to it. Obviously, in relationships, this is very clear. When we commit to a person, you know, then we are basically sort of committing into the future. Okay, so we are committing into that in the future we understand that there are perhaps sometimes issues with trust or whatever, but I'm committing to wanting to trust, committing to wanting to work this out together. Then there's consistency, and this is interesting for those of you who have discovered patterns of repeatedly trusting in the wrong people. Okay, consistency is a pillar of trust because it informs us about the probability, the reliability. Okay, if I, you know, give uh, my my babysitter the task to do certain things with my kids, and 9 out of 10 times they don't do it well, you know, the track record isn't really that good. So there's no consistency. I can't trust. If there is consistency, even if there are mishaps or, you know, tiny little mistakes or whatever, disagreements, it doesn't matter. But if there's a consistency and I can see that, you know, she's trying, the kids are trying, and that there's a certain discipline and a certain motivation to do that, okay, that's then what leads to consistency, and consistency increases trust. Authenticity. And that's something that a lot of you guys here mentioned without being aware of it when you talk about trusting as a matter of feeling. Okay, so you have a lot more trust in someone who has a sort of an authenticity level to them, you know, who comes across as someone who's you know, right there, fully present, who has eye contact with you, who, you know, acts in a way that feels authentic to you, where, you know, where you don't feel that they were fake or that they're playing or that they're, you know, sort of scheming or anything. You know, authenticity is a big pillar of trust in our life. And these things always also, of course, relate to ourselves, but you can best feel this out by you know, sort of looking at your own mechanics, you know, what makes you trust in it, in another person. And then of course empathy, you know, is that other person able to see my point of view? Is the other person even willing to see my point of view? Because if we have disagreements, this is very important in relationships, and there will always be disagreements. Do I trust in that person to be able to work it out with me? And a big part of working things out is empathy, because, you know, if you say, you know, left and I say right, and but we have to sort of come to a conclusion somehow how we're going to proceed, then we need trust. And this trust comes through finding solutions together. And that requires us to see things from the other person's point of view, to be willing to let go of some of our judgments, you know, walking in the other person's shoes, you know, and also being willing to forgive, obviously, you know, and recognizing that, you know, this is all a matter that, you know, growth and expansion and making things work, finding resolutions, that this requires trust. So these are like, you know, just, I know it's a bit mental, guys, but just really feel into this. These are the pillars of trust. This is in general agreed upon, that this is how these mechanics in us work. Okay, these are the most important parts needed for trusting. However, you know, and this is then where some of us have inner conflictions. Uh, Develop, tested, and proven trust, the conditional trust that we mentioned, leads to inner peace, abundance, and effortless. That's correct. But are we really willing to develop, test, or prove our trust? And that is, again, here the willingness that we talked about earlier. So you know, when it comes to like us, you know, wanting to be trustworthy, or you know, trusting that the other person will show up in their best or highest potential, okay, that has to do with these signs and these cues, okay, that we receive from the other person, or that we give, okay. It's always a two-way, right? And here again, the signs of trustworthiness, okay, so how we decide whether we can trust or not. When you meet a person and you have to decide whether you trust that person or not, per statistics, per research, unfortunately, most of us decide whether somebody's trustworthy or not based on external cues. Do you guys know what external cues are? It'll be the way they dress, the body language, the way they look, the way they move, the way their voice sounds, lots of different things, very unaware to us. This sort of first impression. Do you guys know what I mean with this first impression? It's 1 to 1.5 seconds. Okay, it decides, you know, like when you are confronted with a person, and when you're confronted with something more intangible, like an idea or a concept or a teaching or a rule or a law or whatever, it's even more mental. You don't have these external cues, but sometimes you go by like the colors or what it, you know, the cute pictures, okay, and so forth. So this has to do with dopamine. This has to do with our neurotransmitters, okay. So there are certain external cues that can produce sort of inner responses, okay. And because our emotional and mental processing happens so fast without us being aware of, we often literally fall for external cues, okay, whether somebody looks trustworthy or not. Authenticity is another sign. It's like, you know, how congruent is this person? You know, do they do what they say? Do they walk the talk? Do they actually follow through? Okay, are they, you know, sort of just by the way they come across, do they feel authentic to me? Then another aspect of trustworthiness is the outer authority. That's how other people feel about, say, this person or this company. So track record would be something that you can have with a person. You know, have they been proven to be trustworthy for you? Have, you know, they stuck to the agreements? You know, did they listen to your concerns? Did they stick to their promises? And then sometimes also, what is their reputation? How do other people feel about this person? This is where in our social media times reviews come in. Okay, so let's say if 100 people believe that this person or this company is trustworthy, then it's a form of outer authority. Then we'll be more likely to judge a person or company or product, whatever, as trustworthy. Then the rationale, the logic. Okay, so this is something that we often where we often run into problems, because the rationale, okay, it means how we contextualize everything. So let's say I have a child that is acting out, it's throwing a tantrum, it's throwing things around, it's screaming, yelling, calling other people names, you know, like a 3-year-old or whatever, and is really, really acting up. Then of course there is a rationale. Okay, so as a mother, I'll immediately go into like, what's going on here? Oh, okay, he must be really tired. He must be really hungry or whatever. That's a rationale. I can come up with a rationale, which can often be sort of a justification. When it's with children, then this example is easy, you know. But when it's with grown-ups or with companies or with politicians or whatever, then we have a little bit of a problem. Take the paradox, like say with psychopaths or sociopaths. You have a serial killer, and they're in court, and you know, it's not a question of whether or not they're a serial killer. That's proven, and you know, it's obviously you can't trust them. But our rationale can get us into trouble here because it can produce sort of justifications such as, oh yeah, and he had a really, really bad time growing up, lots of trauma, blah, 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 where, you know, we can get pulled into a certain sort of line of argumentation or train of thoughts that can, you know, sort of well, either make a person more trustworthy or less trustworthy. Okay, so you have to be very suspicious here in regards to logic. Okay, because sometimes things sound very logic, but you know, your inner feeling, it really isn't matching up with it, and that's something that you learn is a big part of your own inner compass to make these two go together, and really to work out the difference between your heart and your mind here, how they can better communicate and interact with another, and which one you should more trust and which one you shouldn't. Then a presence also creates a trustworthiness in you. So if somebody is, I mentioned eye contact, if somebody has a good like presence in and of him or herself, but also repetition. If you see somebody more often, the more often you see someone, well, you know, the more likely you're going to trust them as opposed to a stranger. That's part of our human instincts. Okay, so you can feel very familiar with something just through the fact that you are exposed to it every day. That doesn't inform you about the actual trustworthiness, but in you there'll be more of a willingness to trust because you're more familiar to it. So you already know that there can be a problem with familiarity, our sense of normal and our sense of familiarity. And then of course the big section here that you've already hinted at, inner cues, inner feelings. Okay, so according to research, it takes about 6 seconds for us to agree on an inner feeling, and that's typically also where we get stuck in, okay, in a positive or negative way. So now we come to the more interactive part here, guys, where I need you to develop this here for all of us. With all that has been said, as sort of a brief intro into the mechanics of trust and how we, you know, what makes us more willing to trust, the payoff, you know, of trusting, the benefits of it, and the pillars of trust. What is the meaning of trust in self, really? The trust in self is something that some of you have already pointed out is somehow related to the ability to trust in others. Some of you said this in different ways, but we can conclude that the more we can trust in ourselves, the more easily we will be able to trust in others, simply because it means that we have a clear compass of trust in us. In a negative way, if we let ourselves down, if we cannot trust or don't trust in ourselves, then it's also very difficult to trust in others. So you understand that this trust in self here is something that has a lot to do with our personal experiences. And here I wanted to ask you guys, okay, to put this together here as your sort of conclusion now. Now that you are diving a little deeper into this, that you've thought about it in this sort of scholarly way here, in the secular way, now to move a bit more into your feeling and understanding, your awareness. In your opinion, what destroys trust for you? Lies. Okay, lies and deception. Okay. Negative self-talk or imposed from the outside. Okay, that's interesting. Yes, but I'm absolutely with you there, Janet. It's a form of communication, right? So say negative communication, inner and outer. Okay. Betrayal, definitely. Yeah. What else, guys? What makes it hard to trust? What destroys trust? Incongruences, yeah. Incongruences of values. Double standards. Can I write it that way? Yeah, inconsistency. I'm typing what you guys are what you guys are sharing here with me in the chat. Inconsistency. Abuse. Yeah, big one. Fakeness. Yeah. Control. Yes. Unfeeling, narcissistic. Do you mean like lack of empathy, Janet? Okay. Yeah, when you don't feel like the other person is able or willing to relate to you. So you are asking probably the most important question here in this whole sort of realm of talking about trust, namely if it's self-deception, if I seek trust in others. Trust is something that humans cannot destroy. It is, yes, trust in freedom, trust in truth, trust in myself. Exactly, it's trust in love, trust in life itself, trust in truth. You are absolutely correct. And what I hear you asking is if it is self-deception, well, we can put that on the list here. How about we put this on the list? Because self-deception can destroy trust. If anyone who's ever been in a situation, like in an abuse situation or in a, let me just make that example, like say a narcissistic or a toxic relationship, has experienced all different kinds of self-deceit. Okay, oh no, he's only doing this because, and blah blah blah. And we fall victim to our own rationale, our own justifications, right? Yeah. So it's a very good question, and we will find out here why that is, because it really is, if you're asking me personally, one of the biggest reasons why we have a hard time trusting. Yes, so selfishness is a big one. That's the egotism, right? That's a big one for me, guys. That's my pet peeve. I really can't stand it when people are selfish, and this is like, for me, that's a total no-go. Like immediately, like you would have to literally prove this to me over and over again that you're trustworthy. Because if somebody is selfish, I literally don't believe that they're able to be trustworthy. You know, because my value system is such that I always favor basically sort of the greater good for all. And I just don't want to operate with people who are not operating that way. Okay, so here you see this has to do with values, but selfishness is part of this these pillars of trust. Yeah, gaslighting, that would be part of lies and deception. Everybody knows here what gaslighting is, I suppose. Not being connected. Okay, yes, lack of respect of boundaries. Yep. So lack of boundaries and lack of respect, right? I mean, these are two different things, but those are really big ones. Not being present, yes, that's, you guys are really good now, you know. This is like you see, as you're starting to actually feel into this, there are a lot of things for us, and some of them are different for you than they are for me, but there are a lot of things that can really destroy trust in us, and it's important that we become aware of that within ourselves, what it actually is that allows us to trust, and what it is that works against us being able or being willing to trust. So that's really, really important that we understand what that is inside of ourselves. Yeah, being aggressive, erratic. Yes, this is, and aggressive, guys, this can also, we can also feel this sometimes with people who are very defensive as well. Because when people are very defensive, then they can also feel very aggressive. Okay, if you can't read a person, Annette, I think that's when, yeah, there's maybe some kind of inconsistency there or fakeness when somebody's hard to read. You know, there's something isn't matching up, right? Janet is bringing up the part when a situation or even a person reminds us of a past experience, a negative experience. Let's call this a flashback. Okay, this is a really significant in for many of us who have had negative experiences with disappointed trust or even abuse and so forth, that we are actually oversensitive and that we feel reminded of that quickly. Yeah, lack of respect, degrading behavior. Yeah, non-verbal versus verbal. Yeah, Justine, that's the, like when things are not matching up, right? When there's some incongruence, inconsistency, we can put incongruence. So we're picking up on something ain't right. This is related to fakeness. Let's put fakeness here so we have a little more space. But this is already, guys, a really, really good list. And that makes it aware to us that there are a lot of reasons for us to not trust, right? So this, is a big part of our daily lives, and just here, the scholarly perspective on this, what actually makes it impossible for us to trust, or literally to lose this innate human power, really, as Syria, as you pointed out. And I mean, we have an innate trust in all these things, but we can develop conditions in which we are literally unable to trust. But I don't want to go into all these different degrees again, but I just want to point out these main mechanisms that lead to us becoming unable to trust. Number one reason for us, what makes it really hard for us to trust is unawareness, the lack of consciousness. And this is where I'm coming in here with these kind of workshops in the Sacred Self-Heal. And the whole entire Sacred Self-Healing program is about this, increasing the awareness, increasing our consciousness, okay, self-awareness. Then, of course, lack of experience, okay, so that is a given. So in immaturity, due to age, but also immaturity maybe as a consequence of not developed maturity, okay, for many different reasons. Then inauthenticity, and that leans itself onto the unawareness. Okay, if we don't know ourselves, then we don't really know who we are, and if we don't really know who we are, there is a false self, true self paradox in us. Okay, then we also become inauthentic. Okay, laziness. A lot of people get mad at me when I say this, but it's true, because this desire to trust and blindly trust and to have blind faith is a form of laziness, because building trust takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort to navigate through life in that, and to simply externalize it or to simply just blindly trust in everything is a form of laziness. Not listening to inner cues. I think this is something that many of you have already experienced in your own lives, including myself, that this is a big a big cause, okay, in my personal life, why I have become unable to trust, because I have disregarded my inner cues, my inner feelings. Who of you would say the same or similar, that a big part of you either not being willing to trust or unable to trust, or questioning your own trust, is because you've simply didn't listen to your heart, to your inner cues. Yeah, this is a big one for all of us. That's like half of you guys. Then, of course, we can, if we have increased trauma in our life, really, really negative experiences, all the way to like severe, okay, then it's very hard to trust in our, in our own trust. It's very difficult to trust because our sense of normal, our sense of, sort of what is trustworthy and what is not, is seriously skewed. This relates to something Janet shared earlier, or the question that came with that, like, can we sometimes have a hard time trusting because we feel reminded of a similar situation in the past that created a lot of trauma, loss, or pain in regards, in conjunction with trust. That's a big one, guys. Improper boundaries. Yeah, you guys have already mentioned this, that, that makes it impossible to trust if myself or others have improper boundaries or don't respect them. If we have a high level of inner schism, inner conflict in us, and guys, this is probably right now where we are standing here with our collective, the number one reason why people lose trust in everything, in the government and humans all together, in the ability to work things out, to resolve things, to save the planet, to ever sort of really reaching peace and collaboration, is because right now the inner conflicts that we have, and the fragmentation and the schisms that we feel inside of ourselves, especially due to the pandemic and everything, has increased manifold within just 6 months, 9 months, okay? And it makes it really, really difficult for us to trust, or increases our blind trust. That's the bifurcation that I've mentioned many times, where one half of the population goes into this externalized blind trust into something because they don't even want to think for themselves. They don't even, want to do the work. They don't even want to prove. They don't even want to inquire. They don't even want to test the trust. And the other extreme, where we're not trusting in anything anymore, and everything is bad. And this is conspiracy, and this is conspiracy, and so forth, where our inability to trust leads to, perhaps even fantastical thinking. These are the extremes, okay? These are only the extremes. But I want you to understand that this 50-50, this bifurcation, here in America, we can see this as in our political systems right now. And this is not just the United States. This is an overall phenomenon right now, that there is a split in our society. And this has to do with the inner split, with the inner conflictions that we have. Lack of communication is a big one, because it takes time, and we have to express things. I mean, it doesn't matter what it means, what it relates to, whether it's our boundaries or our preferences or our needs or our desires, our goals, our purpose, who we truly are. All that requires us to go into expression and to communicate that. And another big thing, guys, and this is very, very important, is exposure. It's what we are exposed to on an ongoing day-to-day level. So please understand that it is justified. It is a normal human response, okay, to not wanting to trust. Okay, we just have to learn the mechanics a little better in us, and then see where we can find a balance. And maybe just become a bit more picky about things, and this would then be more something like conditional trust, to understand, like, yeah, there are certain things, me personally, I don't trust in the pharmaceutical industry, I don't trust in the food industry, I don't trust in a lot of things, okay? But I know that there are people, that there are companies, that there are scientists, that there are politicians that are trustworthy. instead of not trusting anybody anymore, I focus on the ones that I can trust. I invest in the ones that I can trust, and I want to be trustworthy for others as well. So I try to help others to learn the mechanics of trust so that they can believe in trust again. All right, so this is my conclusion, my personal conclusion of this. So as a kind of balance then here, guys, coming to the end of this workshop, the question to you: what builds trust for you? What are the things needed for you to trust? In my personal world that I just displayed here, I need to be able to feel trust in myself. And when I can trust in myself, then I can also learn to trust in others, which means whenever I come to this dark night of the soul where I feel like I can't trust anything or anybody, I know that I have to refocus to trust in myself. But that's a big process. So to make this a little easier here, let's have us all put together what it is for us. Forgiveness, big one. Yes, what else? Healthy communication. Yes, good one. What makes you trust? What helps you to build trust? Good hygiene. Yeah, that has to do with, okay, in this case, obviously also with the pandemic, but and feeling safety, right? So in this case, it has to do with safety. But it also has to do with some of the other more unconscious aspects, such as these outer cues that we talked about earlier. Acceptance. Can you qualify this a little more, Denise? What do you mean with acceptance?
Yeah, like accepting that I do have a choice, and accepting that that if I made a mistake, that's okay, and accepting that this is my present situation.
Okay. Accountability means that you know that you that you have a choice, that you can make a choice, that it's up to you.
Jona, and being open to, change
Yeah.
perspective, being open to try new things. That I noticed
Neutral,
that
right?
helps me.
Or
Yes.
non-judgmental, right? When someone is non-judgmental, yes, giving space. When I have space to maneuver, and space can also be time, room to grow. This has to do with timing as well. That it's not just about letting others be, but it's also like giving others enough. I mean, it's already a result of trust. When you trust someone, then you can also give them more room to grow, more room to, determine things on their own. But it has to do with freedom. Okay, when someone gives you freedom, when someone gives you, you can decide when to do what, for instance, or how far you go. Yes, silent warmth. There's a stillness in this. Stillness is the better word. In warmth, softness. Heart connection. Yes, when we feel connected. Big one. Yes, respect and allowing, accepting and allowing are they are connected with another. Oops. Allowing is the sort of the advanced form of accepting, and this also goes here into, it also is connected with space and room. Allowing others to be, giving them the space to be, letting them be. Humility, yeah. However, humility can sometimes be faked, guys. That's something where we need to be careful, though, because in times where sort of narcissism has become part of our outspoken sort of dynamics in our societies, someone who appears as humble can easily sort of produce a feeling of trust in us, but it's not always true. Okay, I want to summarize this as balance. And this is a very important one, balance in many different ways. Balance with ourselves, balance with other people. And this has a lot to do with discipline and daily routines. Okay, so this is something that those of you who are regularly working with me already know, that without balance, without inner balance, okay, it's very difficult to be relaxed. Okay, so we become very tense if things are out of balance, and the tenser things become, the higher the stress in us, and the higher the stress, the more inner incongruencies we have, the more fragmentations, more schisms we have. Okay, so that has a lot to do with our daily routines and our discipline, because it's easy, of course, you know, to be all good and all trusting in a good moment, but it also needs to, you know, stay imbalanced, you know, when we are in a not so good moment. Yeah, so there's many different aspects to these. I mean, I'm writing down only the attentiveness, exactly. So the willingness or the ability to be present, right? It's present moment awareness. We have to pay attention, and that can be anything: attention to the cues of the others, but also to our own cues. It's we have, and what is here? What is the opposite of present moment awareness? It's distraction. One of the big things, guys, that are leading to this sort of mass distrust in our lives is constant distraction. One of the biggest problems we all have is this ADHD-ness of reality that we all are developing through the constant distraction that happens through our phones, or happens through, you know, our interaction with technology. We're actually literally not able to handle it. We're literally not able to discern. We feel bombarded. Okay, this is a really big one. It makes it very difficult to trust in ourselves and others, because we don't even have enough time to feel into it, as you have all rightly so identified already. It's a feeling, and we need to feel that feeling, and if we don't have time to feel it, or not enough presence, then it's impossible for us. So it puts us out of balance. Yeah, it requires a little discipline. Experience, yes, of course, Janet, that's a big one. You know, it builds trust. It's a track record. It's a consistency. You know, it's this here actually that comes in with accountability. If we experience ourselves as trustworthy, we can, you know, we make a promise to ourselves and we stick to our promise, then it makes us feel that we can trust in ourselves and with others, obviously. These inner conflictions can have a really big influence on the way we frame something, the way we see something, and that can really be detrimental to our ability to develop trust. So here, just summarizing, you know, knowing oneself, and obviously also our environment, listening to our inner cues, being authentic, being honest with self, knowing one's own needs and goals and so forth, agenda, knowing one's boundaries, and communicating, okay, and being trustworthy. Those are all things that help us to build trust in ourselves. But building trust does take time, it takes work, it takes effort. It means we have to allow mistakes. We have to kind of determine, you know, whom we socialize with, whom we trust in. It means that we have to invest time in educating ourselves, and that we have to be compassionate, present, as you guys rightly concluded, and compassionate with ourselves as well. We have to have a certain commitment to wanting to be trustworthy, wanting to trust, and then also the follow through, you know, like actually doing it. Okay, so guys, we are way over time right now, and so I want to give this to you as a home assignment for yourself. Like, what should I distrust more? What should I trust less in? and what should I trust more in? Okay, and then let's see how we can maybe make this a second part then. Our workshops here lately in all this year have become more complex, and this is now the fourth time or fifth time that this happens, that we find out that we go way over time and that it's better to do a second part. So in the second part of this workshop, we will discover what it is that we really can't or shouldn't really trust in so blindly, and what we should learn to trust in more, and how this then leads to us being able to trust in ourselves more. And then the last subject, and this is a bigger subject, that's why I think it's best to do this second part, is how to rebuild trust after our trust was destroyed or disappointed. How to rebuild trust, how to learn to trust in ourselves again. It was a wonderful workshop so far, guys. You see that these complex subjects, when we do this in this exchange form, that they require a little more time. They require a little more awareness and also working with us, even though it sometimes appears redundant. But that's the way we built this. Okay, they built this awareness and the consciousness that is needed to qualify these things, because we all are in different stages of our journey, and there are different times, okay, where and this is not just in regards to trust, this is also in regards to love, this is in regards to empathy, and so many of these higher vibratory goals that we have to learn to qualify it. There are no yes or no answers to this anymore. When it comes to our higher potential and to really growing into the higher expression of ourselves, we are no longer able to see the world in black and white. We have to qualify these things, and that's why it becomes so much more complex. All right, everyone, thank you so much for your contribution here. I hope that you'll all come to part 2. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.